Welcome, Patrick and Hélène.
Hello and good evening and welcome. Bienvenidos, friends of the Hispanic Society, to Las Tertulias de Arte Hispano, or Hispanic Art Gatherings. I would like to thank our members who have joined us monthly, and welcome to all those who are new members and new friends of the museum and watching their first Tertulia. We continue these conversations, usually on the first Tuesday of each month, although we made an exception this month, at 6 p.m. on this occasion, and which is the second Tuesday of the month. If you are not a member yet, please do consider joining by going to our website, hispanicsociety.org, and search for membership under support. This evening, we're going to do something a little different. I'm joined with by my friend and colleague, Hélène Fontoira, who is head of conservation. I am Patrick Lenigan, head curator of prints and photographs. And we were thinking that we would two exhibitions we've done, photographs by Ruth Anderson in Spain. They happened, the first one in Pontevedra that opened in August, and the second in Zamora on October 20th. And they make sort of a very interesting pair because of the way they showcase the work of this extraordinary photographer. And underneath it, sort of what's driving it, is the photographic project that Archer Milton Huntington, the founder of the Society, envisioned for the institution. And it touches the core of what the Hispanic Society is, what the photography department is, and what our mission as an institution promoting Spanish and Hispanic culture in the broadest sense of the concept is. So we would like to begin, and I think with this we can start right in. Hélène, the first we're going to start with Hélène. The first exhibition was the one in Galicia. Both of these have both exhibitions have stories that are very personal to us, right from how these exhibitions started, going on to what they did. So this is the exhibition in the Museo de Pontevedra, which is a city, I believe, that has some very close personal tie to you, right, Hélène?
Yes, exactly. So, good evening, everybody. And what I would like to share with you today is how I got involved in this unusual and fantastic exhibit. So I was born and raised in Pontevedra, but I've been working at the Hispanic Society for more than 2 decades. And somehow, every time I go to Pontevedra, people approach me because everybody knows that there is this Galician from Pontevedra working in this incredible institution in New York City that has all the Ruth Matilda Anderson photographies. And of course, I always try to help, but I always refer them to the curator of prints and photographs, which is Patrick Lenigan. So the story started with these two gentlemen that you can see here in the picture. Their names are David Quiñones and José Luis Rodríguez. They have an incredible story because actually one is a high school teacher and the other is a veterinarian. But because of their passion of the culture and the Galician costumes, they decided to create an ethnographic association. This ethnographic association does studies, does the analysis and the recovery of the Galician traditional costume. So one day in the summer, 4 years ago, my cousin Juan called me and said, Hélène, I want you to meet these two people. They want to talk to you, of course, regarding Ruth Matilda Anderson. So we went to have a few beers and they asked me that they were telling me that they were recreating this apron, a specific apron that Ruth Matilda Anderson photographed. And if I could help them to find more photographies or more details of the apron. And I said, of course, let me talk to the let me talk to Patrick, and let's see what we can do. But Patrick, if you can go back to the picture before, yes, because I would like to say that there's me in the picture at the opening and the director of the Museum de Pontevedra. While we were having this beer, we also started to dream about the possibility of organizing an exhibition, having the photographs of Ruth Matilda Anderson and next to the costumes that were created over the years. But I think sometimes dreams come true. And this summer, 2022, the exhibition opened at the Museum of Pontevedra. And I have to say that Patrick asked me to represent the Hispanic Society. And I felt honored, not only because I represent the institution where I work, if the most important thing is because it was in Pontevedra, where I am from and where my heart is. So I have to thank Patrick for that, because it was very special for me. So we go to the next one.
No, but you deserved it, Hélène, because this exhibition wouldn't have happened without your being the crucial connection, because it was the fact that you knew them and that you provided the link, because they had tried, but it just wasn't getting through, and you provided a crucial link, the introduction, and then you facilitated a lot of communication. So it was perfectly correct that if I couldn't do it, it should be you.
Sure. So here, what I would like to say about the apron, I have a few facts they gave me about the apron, because you need to understand that that they are not professional tailors. They just started to do this kind of work, and they learn as they were going. So they told me that in order to make this apron, it took them 3 years and a half, and they used 28,500 crystal beads from the Czech Republic, and they were so one by one, following exactly the pattern from the image that they have from Ruth Matilda Anderson. And I think, Patrick, you can tell a little more details, right?
Well, yeah, this is a project that it's a testament to their perseverance and the goodwill on both Museo de Pontevedra, the Diputación, and the Hispanic Society that it actually happened, because there was this little thing called COVID that got in the way. They were scheduled to come in the spring of 2020, which, guess what? That was the middle of COVID. And for them to look at the photos would have been truly amazing for them, because they would have seen things. Instead, we had to do this all digitally, sending them the digital photos. And for instance, they knew this photo on the left, the one that started all this, because we published it in the exhibition catalog of 2009. But what they didn't know until we started talking was that there was also this photo of the clasp. And the clasp, they're so meticulous, and it's really impressive, the detail and care, because they said, well, how are we going to do the clasp? What do we do? And this is what they came up with, but it was the fact that Ruth Anderson had been so close and had been so attentive to these details, and that she'd taken it, that made it possible for them.
Yeah. So this is the beginning of the exhibit, and I'm gonna give you my point of view as Pontevedresa. So I mean, the flow of the exhibition was incredible, and what it shows is the life and customs of Galicia in the 1920s. The work in the fields, in the sea, the villages, the cities. And something that is important is the figure of the woman, because Galicia was un matriarchy. And because of the economy, men had to emigrate. So the women were in charge of the work inside the house and outside the house. So many of the mannequins and the photographies that you're going to see are depicting women at work. And what is even more remarkable is that behind the camera was a woman as well, photographing, and we are looking at this exhibition through the eyes, in a way, the eyes of Ruth Matilda Anderson. We can go to the next. So, for example, here you see on the right, you can see the grinder, el afilador. Patrick, how do you say?
Knife grinder.
The grinder. In the middle, you see the tailor. For example, tailors or seamstress, they used to go to the houses. That's why you have the little box on the floor. They used to go to the houses. They will spend 1 day, 2 days, sometimes 3 days. They will fix whatever they needed to fix, or even they will sew dresses. And it's showing you exactly the life in 1920s. And what is also incredible is, even though I wasn't born in that time, I do remember many of these trades. I remember the milk lady coming in my house in the mornings, and I do remember the fishermen, the women doing the fishermen nets. So let's go to the others. So, for example, other remarkable thing they did is they recreated markets. So, for example, this is the clockmaker.
Yeah. These wooden clogs, yes.
Yeah, that's the word. So, for example, some of the clocks they are hanging. I had them when I was a little girl. I used them. So this is something that is many people can relate. That's why it was such a successful exhibit, because everybody can relate. Old people, young people, everybody likes to see the costume. Everybody enjoys looking at incredible photographs, especially, for example, if you are from Pontevedra or from Galicia, you can see the evolution of the city, and you can understand that some of these traits have been lost, but many of them, they are still alive, and there's still the tradition continues. So it's much more, for me personally, it's much more than an exhibition. It's just... So this part of the exhibit is a little more serious and formal, because what they are trying to show is the different costumes in Galicia. Even though Galicia is a small region, every province has a different costume. The costume from the north is not going to be the same as from the south, or from the coast, or from the interior. So they are trying to show and recreate all the different costumes depending of the provinces. They also added, which is remarkable, the jewelry as well. Some of the little cases. We cannot appreciate it, but I'm just saying it so you know. And this is I mean, look at the picture of Ruth Matilda Anderson. It's just incredible. It's beautiful, and the way these two gentlemen recreated it, I think is just incredible. So I have to say again, I do remember these ladies bringing the milk to my house. We can continue. So this is, aside from Ruth Matilda Anderson's photographies, they also use other sources, because in Galicia at that time, the problem is that they didn't, I mean, nobody did photography. The only photography that people had was when First Communion, baptisms, or weddings, or very specific occasions. So that's why Ruth Matilda Anderson photographies are very important. But at the same time, they were able to look at certain paintings. And this painting that we have, probably all our friends recognize, Galicia from Visions of Spain, from Sorolla. So what they did here, which is beautiful, is just they recreated Sorolla's painting using all the different costumes, and you can see all the same colors and even the position of the ladies at the cattle market. Next, please. Again, for me, I mean, this for me is very emotional, and this is probably one of my favorite photographies, because I do remember this. I do remember. I think they stopped doing this maybe 10 years ago, even a little less. And I remember in the summertime going to San Censo, going to Porto Novo, and seeing all the women working together. So in a way, for me, this is still alive. And I think again they did a. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, no. When the show that we did before this one in Galicia, Mirada de Antaño, when it opened in Lugo. The mayor of Lugo looked at this and said, these are from the 20s, but we all remember this from the 50s, the 60s, the 80s. So what you're saying is absolutely true. And this was why when we did the show of Anderson's photographs in Asturias, the problem is always, how do you title these exhibitions? And someone came up with the brilliant title for that one, Hallazgo de lo Ignorado, which in English would be sort of like the discovery of what was overlooked. And it's exactly what you say, Ellen. It took a outsider coming with a distinct desire to record these things, because this was daily, everyday. This was daily life, and no one gave it much thought at the time. So that if she hadn't taken these photos, this would never be recorded. I mean, that's why one scholar of Galician life says, if you want to know what life was like in Galicia in the 20s, you need to go start. You can do nothing better than to start with Ruth Anderson's photos.
Yep, exactly, precisely. So again, this is another. I mean, there are so many images, and it was very difficult to choose the images for this PowerPoint, because the time is limited, and I cannot show you so many things. But
and we have another show too. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So again, this is the everyday life. So probably I am assuming these ladies, they were going to the village, into the city, and you.
No. The story behind these two ladies is great, Ellen. This is the from Muros to Pindo via Fe. You can do it, I think, in an hour by car today. But for Ruth and her father, this was a 2-day trip. They had to stop at one place, and what's on those ladies' heads are the baggage, Ruth Anderson and her father's suitcases, and the photographic material that they're going to take.
Oh wow!
So, it's.
Did you notice that one of the ladies, she's barefoot?
Yeah.
Barefoot. Yeah. This is how. Okay, let's go for the good anecdote. Again, I mean, this is another example. The market, I think, is remarkable. The way they recreated, even with the chickens up there, is just beautiful. And look at all the details.
Yeah, but you can see in your photo on the left, they were. When I saw the plans for this show, I was really impressed at the thematic structure. And you look at the label for this section, and it's something like a weight of life on your head.
Yeah.
And the entire section is about all the costume of what these women wore as they carried all sorts of different things on their head. It's not just the luggage we saw in the last one, or you can make out in your photo, there's a woman with a whole bunch of they look like woven baskets, but obviously the funniest one or the most striking one to us today is this woman with, I don't know, I think they're close to 20 chickens on her head, and she's bringing them to market, and they're eventually going to end up in Madrid, according to the notes.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
I mean, you want your chickens to come from Galicia if you're going to dine well.
They say that the best Galician fish, you can eat it in Madrid. because
Oh, well.
they send the good stuff to the capital. Yeah.
Well,
Okay, so I also wanted to share this one because I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to see a raincoat of the 20s, the 1920s. This is a very organic way nowadays to protect yourself from the rain. And Patrick says that there are better pictures, but I chose this one, right, Patrick?
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and
because it's the one they used. The photo you can see in the back behind the mannequin is an absolutely spectacular photo of this young boy looking out. But this is the one they used, so this is the one you had to put.
and the boy is barefoot.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the next. So, woof, these are the famous autochromes that Patrick keeps explaining to me what autochromes are, but I think I get it. But if you could explain to the public.
Sure.
Again,
The autochrome process is invented by the French brothers Lumière. It's part of their efforts to invent color moving pictures. And what it is it's a glass plate that will produce a positive because they have put finely ground potato flakes that are dyed in red, green, blue. So it's the RGB process with potato flakes on a glass plate, so that instead of exposing a negative, you expose a positive, but with color. And what happens is that you get a color image, but the color coating on top of the glass plate, the light sensitive material, reduces your exposure time, so that where if it's say 1/60th of a second, you probably need 1/20th or 1/15th of a second. That means that you can't take pictures generally of people doing too much motion. So if you look at this one of the bagpipe player, he's adopted a pose where he's standing still so that you can get an image. But the advantage is you can get some absolutely brilliant and resplendent color. And this is from 1926.
You're beautiful. Okay, next. What's next? So, bueno, I think I don't want to talk too much because otherwise we're running out of time. But again, I mean, another beautiful example of how the way they recreated. And what we did here, Patrick and I, as you can see, I mean, I took the picture with showing Ruth Matilda Anderson picture in the exhibition, but at the same time, Patrick had a great idea of showing the original, so we could compare, and I mean, and it's just beautiful. Let's go next. Oh, well, yes, I just wanted to share this detail with you because the day of the opening, this gentleman approached me and he spoke to me and he said that he was the creator of the clocks that you can see on the left-hand side. They asked him to do a recreation of Ruth Matilda Anderson's photography. And he told me his whole story, that he inherited this trait by his grandfather and his grandfather, no, by his father and his father by his grandfather. And what he's trying to do is just recycle this tradition and adding, for example, as you can see, he paints them and he adds funny things so people can start wearing them again. Something that he did that I thought it was very interesting. He added rubber at the bottom, so they are not as harsh when you walk. And I mean, he's a very proud and happy person because he loves what he does. And yes.
Well, I thought this was interesting because one of the things that really impressed me about Jose Luis and David is that they put a great deal of care into the costumes, but it didn't stop there. They also found someone who worked in Azabache, that's the jet stone in Galicia, to make contemporary replicas of pieces that were seen in the photos. And so I was impressed that they'd done this with the shoes. And it hit me because when we did our show in Asturias in 2018 with the Museo de Pueblo Asturiano, they put up they recreated, this is a photograph Anderson took in Asturias of a display of shoes she saw. And it occurred to them that they have in their collection period shoes, period suecos from that they could exhibit. And it just appealed to me because it shows how in different contexts, different museum settings are trying to bring these things to life, the photographs to life, by showing either that they were real objects from the past that we treasure as heritage, or in the case of the gentleman in the show in Pontevedra, who is continuing the tradition in a living way. And it's all in a certain sense possible because of the photographs that Anderson took. And that shows how they are part of a heritage that continues. And it also shows what the Hispanic Society is doing in its role to keep this heritage going. And I think that's a transition in a way to the second exhibition in Zamora, if you don't mind, Ellen.
Of course.
So, right. So on October 20th of this, just a few months ago, I was in Zamora for the opening of this exhibition. And although the exhibition is only a few months old, in a way, it's an exhibition that has been, for me, many years in the making. And I say that because here you see the opening sign for it. The idea of Anderson with her car that she traveled around. The first year, they didn't have a car, the first exhibition, and they found themselves almost stranded a couple times in very remote places. So on the second trip, they bought this car and they retrofitted it, and it's got that huge trunk to hold their photographic equipment. But the show with Zamora was very special to me because when I started at the Hispanic Society 27 years ago, there was no cataloging really of the photography collection. It was just spread out all over the place. And as I was trying to get a handle of it, I came across these photos from a tiny village outside Zamora called Villalcampo. And to my surprise, they had mounted on Easter a full Holy Week play. This is the scene where Judas is kissing Christ. And then the play goes on, and here is a dramatic photo of the crucifixion, and there's the Virgin at his feet. And if you look at the left, the Magdalene is weeping, but out of the corner of her eye, she's looking at Ruth Anderson taking the photo. Obviously, this American woman in this tiny village was something of a sight. I looked and I saw also this incredible photo that the townspeople just came, and it's more than, they came from 20 kilometers around to see this play, and you can see them climbing up the trees. It was obviously something special, and I didn't know at this point who Ruth Anderson was. I looked in the same section and I saw this incredible photo of a drummer from a confraternity in Zamora. It turns out that this figure is called the Merlu, and he is an iconic figure for Zamora in their Holy Week. And this is an incredibly powerful photo for people of Zamora, and it resonates with them. I learned that later too. There are also these remarkable scenes sort of daily life in these moments. And here they are in a procession for Holy Week, and the people are bending in to give encouragement to the people who actually have to do the hard work of carrying this. And you can see these holes in the mount of this float, and that's for them as they stand up so they can look out and see. But it really was quite a remarkable photograph to capture this moment. So we did an exhibition in New York City at an institution that no longer exists, the American Bible Society, of photographs from Spain that Anderson took of these religious processions. We did a book on it, and in this book we included this photo. I didn't think anything much of it, but unbeknownst to me, the head of the provincial archive in Zamora visited the Hispanic Society, bought the book opened just to the Zamora section. He was floored, and he saw among these things, he saw this photo. And this photo floored him yet more, because if you go to Zamora today, these buildings don't exist. They're attached to a Romanesque church that at some point was torn down. Because we knew the date of the Holy Week procession, they knew the building was standing longer than they thought. So with the book, he said to himself, this woman, Ruth, he's a remarkable man, this gentleman, and he's since become a very good friend, Florian Ferrero. He said, we have to do something with Ruth Anderson, but I still didn't know him. I visited Zamora in 2006, and I innocently knocked at the door of the archive, and they apparently told him, there's someone downstairs who we think you should see. He's a foreigner, but he speaks Spanish pretty well. And that's how I met Florian. And he then came to the Hispanic Society, and we looked at some more photos, and he was impressed at what he saw. And we said, yeah, we need to do something. But then there was the crash of 2008, and then Florian retired. And I said, this is never going to happen. But a very good friend of Florian's, Alberto Martin, works at the Archivo Municipal of Zamora, and he got in touch with me. And in spite of COVID, we prevailed, and we managed to do this show. So the show opens, you come down a flight of stairs, and you're greeted by this photo of Ruth Anderson. The space is divided up very beautifully. The photographs are set back in this wonderful LED setting. Since we have the negatives that Anderson used, we work off the digitized negatives. We sent them to the best printer in Madrid to create the prints for them, and they're really stunning. Alberto worked very hard to get a designer for the exhibition and the people to install it. And they erected this in the center, well, off to the side, which is a photo of Ruth Anderson, that trunk we talked about in the car. And you can see how it's full of the photographic equipment. And to make a sort of diorama to bring it to life, to remind everyone that there is this woman who traveled to these remote places. And this is how she unloaded and loaded the back of her car. Facing that diorama are these two huge photos. And I've got the people to give you a sense of scale. On the left, you have a photo of Anderson and her assistant on these trips, Frances Spaulding, taking a break of cookies and milk as they're in this town, Villalcampo. And on the right, you have Anderson taking notes as people tell her about the photos. And we thought these two photos are fantastic to give people an idea as to why Anderson's photos are so good, that she sat down and she ate with these people, and she approached them respectfully, and she listened to them, and she took notes. So these people who worked the hard life that Alen has pointed out so clearly in the Galician photos, and Zamora is just the same, they were stunned, I think, and honored and flattered that this American driving her own car should come up to them and say, what are you doing? And they're, in their minds, they're not doing anything special. This is daily life. And she's interested in how they make their nets, how they weave their clothes, how they make their hats. And so they stop, and they're proud, and they're a little confused because who is she? But it's the quality that she gets in her photos results from this. They relax before her. They're proud of what they do, and that's what makes her photos so great. So that at the center of this exhibition, we have these two displays which kind of help to explain how the photos are what they are. And the show, just as the one in Pontevedra set records, in Zamora we're setting records, and you can see it's well attended, and there's good reason, because these photos are spectacular, and it's not the typical touristy thing. She went into remote areas and found landscapes that were absolutely stunning and beautiful, and they resonate with the locals. She, in Villalcampo, got this amazing portrait, and the woman in this case didn't want to have her picture taken. And the locals said to her, oh, come on, what are you doing? Let her take your photo. And what was resulted is perhaps one of the best photos. This is the photo they've been using for publicity. It's 10 feet wide and the big banner on the museum. She went to a town like this, Morales de Vino, and she took this photo of this gentleman in the door of his shop. And to give you a sense of how these photos can resonate, my friend Alberto sent me a WhatsApp. He says, Patrick, you're never going to believe this, but I was giving a tour to my in-laws in the gallery, and this person came up to me about this photo. They'd come to Zamora from Madrid to see this photo because the man in the door is their grandfather. They found out about it because their cousins told him, and they're all going to meet in the Christmas season and come together to the show and look at the photo of their grandfather together. And that is a very moving story. These are the sort of stories that we do find when we do these Anderson exhibitions. And they show us that these photos, which seem to be a timeless past, just as Ellen, you were saying in Galicia, that it's things you remember, that it's a past, but it's somebody's past. And when we talk about heritage, I mean, this is heritage because it's their personal heritage in a very direct way. And it's why the work that Anderson did at Huntington's behest is so important. And I can appreciate that. I can perhaps more directly appreciate what it must have been like for Anderson to travel through, because one of the things I like to do as I've done one of these projects, I get to know the photos. And so I want to go to these places and I want to see what they're like today, because that's another way of appreciating the then and the now. For instance, Anderson went and visited this very important, but very small, Visigothic church, San Pedro de la Nave, outside Zamora. She went in 1926. At that point, it was known that they were going to erect a dam and they were going to flood this valley. She saw the church then before they moved it. It's a major site, and the authorities recognized that they had to rescue it and preserve it. So they took it apart and they moved it stone by stone. It's been well photographed by locals, but some of her photos, like this one, showing it in its setting, are new to them in Zamora. They hadn't quite seen some of these. When you see a photo like this of it sitting in the valley, you see not just the monument, but you see how it existed in 26, how it was in some ways a living monument, that things have been added on and adjusted. And this is important because it's a major monument of Visigothic art. Anderson knew to look for it because Huntington loved Spanish medieval history. So he knew about the Visigoths, and he knew that this monument was important. And so he put it on her itinerary. But if you go today, this is what you see. You see it way up, not in the valley anymore. You see it cleaned up. It's got, this photo shows a front entrance that wasn't there. The roof line has been reconstructed. It's a very different monument. And yet when you see it today, it's sort of a pure monument outside of time almost. And yet that's not how it was in 1926. And this is important to remember as we look and we think about what is heritage, what are architectural monuments, and how they're living and they evolve and they have different stages. In a different way, human architecture on a more modest scale evolves. This is in a town called Ricobayo. This is the Parador de Faustino. It's not a parador like the ones that the state runs. This is just where people stayed. Ricobayo was a major roadway at the time. The car parked in front, by the way, is Ruth Anderson's. It was mainly mule carriers who stopped there. And the Parador doesn't exist anymore, but Anderson took very detailed photos of the interior and other rooms, and they're beautiful records of a way of life and an important part of the life that doesn't exist. So Florian, his wife Concha, and I, we drove first to San Pedro de la Nave, and then we went to Ricobayo to see if anyone could tell us about the Parador de Faustino. Ricobayo, this is what it looked like in 1926 when Anderson visited. This part of the town is no longer the central part. It's right on the river. It's what you would visit now, I believe, is up a little higher on those hills. So there are two bars. We stopped in at the Cafe Bar Casa Segundo, and in there, we asked the bartender, so can anyone tell us in the town about the Parador de Faustino? And the bartender says, well, I'm not from here. It turned out he was from Venezuela. He says, but the gentleman over there who has no hair, but he's not bald, he can tell you. So we went up to the gentleman over there who was not bald. And we said to him, can you tell us about the Parador de Faustino? And he looks at me and he looks at Florian and he says, you're the curator of the show in Zamora. I was just there yesterday. I was looking to see you. And he says, oh yes, but I can tell you about the Parador de Faustino. The family still exists. The Parador doesn't exist anymore. The one who could tell you is not very well. He's old. He says, but I wanted to see you because I'm originally from Villalcampo. And we had heard that there was a house in Villalcampo which had a clock, a sundial figure up there over the door. And they had told us, oh, the house is still there, but the sundial isn't anymore. Well, the sundial is in this gentleman's garden. And he's got this installed around it. And the house was his grandmother's and then his mother's. And he had taken it down because he was afraid it would be stolen. But there we are, that's Florian on the left, and there is my friend, my new acquaintance Fermin in the middle, and there I am standing with his, in his garden. And you can see that he's got, in honor of its function as a sundial in his mother's and grandmother's house, he's got this beautifully landscaped garden device right there indicating the compass directions. And it's again a bit of progress that, you know, he's moved on, he's got this lovely garden. But what about the house? He still has the keys to the house. Here's the house. You can see where the sundial should have been. There is his grandmother letting Ruth Anderson into the house. And here he is letting me into the house. And he doesn't really quite know what to do with the house because it was his mother's house. And I've tried to take Ruth Anderson's photo. And you can see that the alcove on the right and the door on the left. If you go off the door on the left, you have the kitchen as Ruth Anderson saw it. And you have the kitchen as it was today. It's interesting to see how much continues. The newspapers are still on the top there. The functions are more or less the same. The wooden chair has changed a little, but there's the hearth over the fireplace is a little better. But he doesn't know what to do with it. He wants to keep it. He wants to respect the memory, but he's not going to live there. In Villalcampo, there was also the stage set where this play happened. And that is how it looks today. Here is the building from different angles. And as we were looking at that, this gentleman in the black shirt, in the black pullover, came up to us. He says to us, so you're the curators from the show in Zamora. He too had been there yesterday. By the way, this was on a Friday. The show opened on Wednesday. The show opened on Wednesday. The news came out. They went on Thursday. On Friday, we were traveling around and they saw us. He found us because Fermin had told him that we were going to be there in the afternoon and he was waiting for us. And he's from the town. He comes back and he is the alguacil. He's sort of, how would you describe an alguacil, Hélène?
Oof, that's complicated to, how do I describe an alguacil? What did he say to you?
Well, he's from the town. Then he married. He went to Madrid, but he now lives in Zamora, but he comes every afternoon. He's trying. It's the classic case of someone who's who's moving on, but still affiliated. And I understand that as alguacil, he's sort of, it's his job to patrol and make sure everything is more or less correct.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah, but my friend Florian, they record him often for things in Zamora. So we would go up to people and say, oh, I've seen you on TV. And he said, but I've been retired for 8 years. They're still showing the same clips. But so he had, he showed us around the church and in the area where things were, and he had the key. So we got into the church, and this is the photo Anderson took. And I tried to take the photo Anderson took. In this case, I found it interesting because it's, you know, the ground hasn't changed. The building's the same. So you stand where you try to figure out where she stood, and you learn the difference between the camera you have and the camera she had. But you also see, again, in the small details, how things have shifted around. And you can see at the lower right of this photo, Florian and the alguacil are looking at something which is on the left of the photo here and on top of the confessional. It's moved. And the other thing, of course, is that the church now has benches, which it didn't have in the previous photo. And so the discussion was, have they taken the benches out of the photo because they want to get the floats out for Holy Week, or were there just no benches? But when you look at Anderson's photo, I also ask myself why she took that photo and not a more traditional photo head on. And the only thing I can think is that a photo like this gives you a better sense of the depth and the space. And digitally, you can take as many as you want. You don't waste film. But when you're very careful, she took a lot of photos, but she was at the same time very careful what she took. She picks her angle closely. And so this shot gives her a sense of the depth rather than the frontal. But these are the sort of things you don't think about until you actually stand in the place and you say, well, this is the choice she made. This is why she did it. But it makes you think again, even though the space is the same, you know, why she took the picture she took. And the small changes remind you how this building, which is the heritage and a monument for the locals, how it too has evolved and changed over time. So we came out of the church and we were talking among ourselves, and two other ladies came up. The alguacil had taken the keys to the church from them, and they were coming to reclaim their keys. And as they talked to us, we told them about the show, and Villalcampo is only 15, 20 minutes drive from Zamora, but for these people, some of them, it's quite an endeavor to get to Zamora, and they wondered, well, how would they do it? There was talk about, would the Diputación, that's the regional government, arrange for a bus to take them in? And the one looks at me and she says, but when we get there, will there be someone to explain it to us? And the question was so sweet and so sincere. It was also very humbling and flattering at the same time. Flattering because she expects us to be able to explain it to them, but humbling because it made me realize what my job at the Hispanic Society is in a way. As a curator, my job is to oversee this collection, to pass it on to the next generation, but also to explain it to the present, to keep it safe and to study it. And in a bigger way, that's what we're all doing, all the professional staff at the Hispanic Society, curators, conservators, educators. We're preserving a collection, we're preserving a heritage, and we're keeping it safe, and we're explaining it so that when the people from Villalcampo come, there is someone to explain it to them. And this is a lesson for us too, on our own travels. It's a lesson I remember because as I stare at San Pedro de la Nave and I say, my God, that's a beautiful, absolutely stunning building that has lasted 1,500 years. It's a testament to the people who built it. It's a testament to us and everyone who's preserved it and cherished it. But what we see today is the progress from that. And again, it's the Hispanic Society's splendid mission that we are the heirs to. We're the heirs to Ruth Anderson. We're the heirs to the curators of the 20s. We're the heirs of Huntington. And I hope that there will be curators, conservators, photographers after me continuing this. And so when that woman said to me, "Y habrá alguien que nos lo explique," I thought, that's true. That's what we do. So thank you.
That's true. So
Thank
Patrick, you have to keep in the archives all the photographies that you took, because actually probably maybe in 50 years somebody's going to be studying your photography as well.
I want to let you guys know that we have a few relatives of Ruth Anderson in the audience tonight.
Really? Get their names and emails. I want to talk to them.
Yes, I will post in the chat so we can get their contact. There is a question from the audience if there's going to be a chance to see these exhibitions in New York.
Oh, I would love for that to be possible. It has been, I won't say a nightmare. It's because but it has been a labor of love, intense love, and supreme diplomacy on my friend Alberto's part to get the show to happen in Zamora. And I know that comparable blood, sweat, and love were expended to make the show happen in Galicia. And we would dearly love to get these shows into New York. It's a question of logistics and having the spaces, the time, and the money, because 75 mannequins aren't going to transport themselves. They're not. It's not going to be 75 plane tickets.
But Patrick, remember that miracles happen.
Yes,
miracles happen.
yes. This would be great. I would love to do these shows, and I welcome. I'm all ears for suggestions and ways to make this happen, because I think, as you can see, these are shows that go straight to the heart of what the Hispanic Society is, its history, and they're also testaments to the ties we have with Spain, that they run far, they run wide, they run deep.
Yeah.
We have a question specific to one image, actually related to that, the cathedral you were speaking about outside Zamora. And someone asked if those were animals. I think it's the one with the landscape. And
This one or
no, I think the previous one.
this one?
The one with the valley. No, the one that showed the valley.
Oh, okay, that's San Pedro de Nanabe. Hold on, sorry.
And they were wondering if those were animals in the landscape, specifically pigs. If you can maybe speak more about that.
Oof, well, I can't see the animals in question. I don't. This is a little bit outside my, I don't think there were pigs. I can't answer that. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
If we were in Extremadura, I'd take odds on bet that they were, but I don't think this is an area for pigs.
Okay, and then another person from the audience is asking if the show in Zamora is still on view.
Absolutely. It's on until January 20-something. And I heartily recommend a visit to Zamora. And it's also incredibly easy to get there now from, I mean, I don't know where the questioner is asking us from, but Zamora now has an AVE or an Alvia, which gets you there from the train station of Chamartin in a little over an hour. I mean, when my first visit to Zamora was 1986. The train situation was pretty poor, and it's gotten so much better. it's strange, but Zamora is easier to get to than Salamanca in terms of time, and Salamanca's closer. So I would recommend it. Zamora's got also the cathedral, which is a beautiful monument, and there's a lot of Romanesque. And if you have your own car, I hope I've persuaded you to come see San Pedro de la Nave.
Yeah.
So we don't have more questions from the audience at this time.
Okay, well, I have a question for you, Elen.
Okay.
Your friends in Pontevedra, are they likely? What do they think they'll do next?
They are always, they always have, lots of different projects aside from the costumes. They also dance traditional Galician dances, La Muñeira. So they got several premios. They travel all over the place, and I think what they are doing now, because it's not only recreating all these costumes. They go to antique dealers. They buy Manila shawls, because there's a lot of there's a big tradition also in Galicia with Manila shawls that they came from Seville through the sea all the way up. So, for example, in Galicia, it was people that had money had Manila shawls. So what they do is they go to antique dealers, they buy shawls. Sometimes they try to buy all costumes, even though unfortunately this is something that in Galicia we don't have that many. I think it's because there wasn't a tradition of keeping the costume.
Yeah, but that's what they told me. That's what they told me when they started. They said they were doing this because they weren't preserved. And I thought, how is that possible? But then as I looked at Anderson's book from 1939 about Gallegan costumes, there's a really telling anecdote. They're having trouble finding local costume, even in 1926. And they get a lead and they go to this tiny town, Lestedo, outside of Santiago. And they get to Lestedo, they find someone with costumes, but it's not the person that they were looking for, and they're sort of disappointed. They have to go another 6 kilometers beyond this tiny town to find the person. They find the person, and she's saving up the clothes in a wooden chest, and she's put oranges in the wooden chest to help preserve them, but the oranges have gone bad. And so part of the costume has gone bad. And the most important part is still good. It's the wedding dress that the woman whose wedding dress it was refuses to wear it because she says, I'm not gonna wear it again, it's not. So they put the daughter in the wedding dress. And Ruth Anderson thinks that she's taking photographs because she knows that the daughter is going to wear it when she gets married, that she's taking photographs of the daughter in her wedding dress before the fact. But it's interesting because it shows exactly, it wasn't until you said this that I remembered what they had told me, and how this does show it. And it shows also that they dance is kind of interesting because it shows how the costume is not just an isolated thing, it's a part of a way of life. And it's interesting that they're recreating and preserving an entire way of life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in terms of the costumes, I think one of the reasons is the humidity and the insects. The humidity in Galicia is a killer. So it's very difficult to preserve textiles, and any textile conservator can tell you. And I think one of the reasons is maybe they pass it on, or they use this as rags, as the costumes they got old, they reuse it for something else, and it was very difficult to keep them generation through generation because of the climate and the no way to preserve all those textiles. So that's why there's no remains of the Galician costume. The only place they told me they went is El Museo do Povo Galego in Santiago de Compostela. They have the best collection of all the Galician costumes, but otherwise there's none.
Well, that's very interesting, and yeah. Well, thank you, Ellen, for joining me in this tertulia. It's much more.
It's always a pleasure.
Yes, likewise. And I'd like to thank all of our viewers out there for joining us, and good night and hasta la próxima.
Oh, Patrick, we do have a last question.
You have me sign off and then you have another question. This is an encore then, right?
Yes. So someone is asking regarding digitizing our collection and making them accessible in the internet. If we have plans, the Hispanic Society has plans to consider doing that.
Of course, we have plans to consider it. I consider it every time I do one of these shows. The Hispanic Society is a world-class collection. At present, we are very understaffed and we don't have all the resources we would like. What that means is that where the Department of Prints and Photographs was 2 people, it currently is 1 person, the 1 person you see on this screen. And I do the digitizing, but I do the digitizing, I do the cataloging, I do the exhibition, I do the writing, and it's hard to do it all. And you can't, I know that there are grants out there and I'd love to get them, but our infrastructure is so behind. It's going to be a slow, long process. I apologize to everyone who wants to see these online. Trust me, I want to see them online as much as you do, probably more, because you don't know what you're not seeing. I have a good idea of what you're not seeing. And it's I'd love for them to be online. It's something we need to do, and I'm very much aware of it. It was in 2004, 2005, I reached out to the Eastman House and the imaging people in Rochester for guidelines about how to do this. And I have become a photographer. Well, my photography's gone up many levels. And I've learned about the digitizing because the only way any of this gets digitized is if I do it. And I know people are going to tell me there are grants out there. And yes, I know there are grants out there, but you have to supervise them. You have to be with them. And if there's only 1 person in the department, that doesn't work. So thank you. I wish we could. I hope we can. Miracles happen, right, Ellen?
Yes, every day. Always positive.
So thank you for the question. And I guess now can I say thank you all for joining and hasta la próxima.
Hasta la próxima. Thank you.
Okay, I have